morning, everyone. You find us here. It's 12 degrees centigrade, 54 Fahrenheit, and we are alone in the wilderness. 3.5 million hectares of untrammeled African wilderness, 2.2 million of which is the Kruger National Park, 60,000 of which is the Sabi Sands Wildtuin, and 1,500 of which is the little piece of land that we find ourselves on now. It's called Djuma. And we also go on to Arathusa. I say I'm alone in the wilderness because we're on only one vehicle. My name is James Hendry. Behind we have Phil, who's on camera, trussed up like a Michelin man. It's not that warm out here. In the control room we have Tara and Eugene frantically trying to fix the other vehicle, who is Wendy. Wendy is being a bit obstreperous of late. Brent is currently lying in his bed. That is because Wendy is being obstreperous. Our plan this morning is to try and follow up on some leopard that we heard just recently. We're going to head in a northerly direction to see if we can find. I would also very much like to see the lion pride that they saw yesterday, which I managed to miss while I was in Johannesburg. And I also wanted to remind you that we love to hear from you. We love your comments. We love your questions. We love to hear anything you have to say. Hashtag Safari Live or questions at WildEarth.tv. I'm just going to let you listen for a quick 10 seconds to what's going on around us, and then we'll move on and see if we can find that leopard. Very nice dawn chorus has started. We've got southern black tit behind, crested barbets, bearded woodpeckers, ringneck doves, rattling cisticolas, oxpeckers, and just the lovely sense of the anticipation of the African dawn. All right, we're going to move on now. We're going to head off in a northerly direction, like I said. There was the sound of a leopard calling, sounded like a male a bit earlier. We'll see if we can't pick up on him and also try and find the tracks of that pride that was found yesterday. Right, here we go. Beautiful pink there on the clouds. Not as cold as it might be. I suspect quite strongly that's because we've had a cloud cover during the night. And well, I think that front that came through last week is probably finished, which is excellent news indeed. I have nothing but positive reports from Jamie, who said you were very kind to her, which is excellent. Thank you for that. She had a great time, so hopefully we'll be seeing more of her soon. We might have to call her something else. It's a bit similar to my name, I think. On a morning like this, the leopard will generally keep moving for a little bit longer because the cloud cover gives them a little bit more in the way of olfactory concealment. With a bit of a breeze in the clouds, any animals they might be trying to prey on wouldn't be able to smell them so well. But that said, if he's calling, he's probably not on the hunt. Excuse me 1 second, we have a slight technical hitch and I'm just going to plug something into this monitor so that I can see what I'm saying to you. Right, so there we go. Okay, we're going to carry on. Don't worry about it, Phil. We'll make a plan some other time. Okay, on we go. Checking some traps here. Looks very much to me like a lioness trap, but probably from yesterday. That waterhole was where they were seen yesterday, so maybe we'll be lucky again today, but they will move during the night, but possibly not that far with the little cubs. Anybody out there knows when those cubs are born, it would be great to know, because I find so often we tend to forget when they're born, and suddenly you have a cub that's 3 months old for 4 months. So keep a note of it, and keep a note of how little those cubs are, and let's try and keep an accurate record of their lives. Going to be a magnificent sunrise, sorry. Sunset was yesterday, I think. Hello, Jeffrey in Austin, Texas. Good morning to you. You want to know, are there any records of lion cubs being killed by birds of prey? Jeffrey, I've never heard of one, but I don't think it's impossible. I've heard of leopard cubs being taken, possibly because they tend to be, the mothers have to leave them for longer, and you know, they don't have the protection of a pride. So, I mean, it's certainly possible. They are the right size for an eagle or even an eagle owl. So yeah, it's definitely possible. It's a very different atmosphere from the dawn that I experienced in Johannesburg yesterday, where the dawn chorus was made up of sirens and hooting. This is far more pleasant. You can hear the crested Franklin heralding the sun as it pops up over the horizon. Into the area. Some buffalo there to our left. I'm not going to stop for them now. There's also one on the road in front of us. There he goes. Morning beef. Alright, well, we'll have to stop for him. Can't really go through him, can we? This is a distinctly unpleasant thing for him to show us at this time of the morning. Come on, get on with it. Now move away. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, particularly respectful of him, but I guess we weren't being that respectful ourselves. Thank you. Righty. Keeping an eye out for the tracks all the time. Tracking can be a very, I mean, you need extreme patience to be a good tracker, and so I've never been a particularly great tracker, but what you do need to do is balance speed with caution and watching what's going on. So I need to keep an eye out for the tracks, but at the same time, if this leopard's moving, then we need to be quite alert to the fact that he could be quite far ahead of us. This is where Brent swears blind the last time he heard the leopard was. I don't see any tracks though. There definitely aren't any tracks. So unless the leopard was flying, he wasn't coming along here. I've yet to see, there we go. I've yet to see a flying leopard. Now there's a hyena that I've just seen. Roundabout where they said they heard him. So what we'll do is we'll go onto the dam and just see if we can't, see if we'll switch off and see if he doesn't call again. Sun, which has just popped up over the horizon. Looks magnificent. Right, so let's just be quiet a second here and look at that beautiful sunrise. So I'm just going to listen for the next 30 seconds or so and see if we don't hear him. You can hear the Egyptian goose calling. unlike many of the European goose species or North American goose species, the Egyptian goose is not in fact a true goose. We don't actually get, I think other than the spur-winged goose, we don't actually get true geese. The Egyptian goose is in fact a duck. And none of our, as far as I know, well, there are a few of our duck and goose species that do migrate, but the Egyptian goose is not one of them. Now let's just listen for 20 seconds. So you can hear all the Franklin calling. There's no leopard sound. Okay, so what we're going to do, look at that. I mean, isn't that the most magnificent thing to see in the morning? Here comes the sun. You can just see it peeking through the trees there. Oh, that's just very spectacular. And one of the things that obviously the internet is not able to convey to you just yet is the sense of smell and the freshness that a morning like this brings. I can smell the buffalo that were around yesterday. Buffalo smell like a dairy. So if you've ever been to a dairy, that's what buffalo smell like. Smell a bit of the mud around the water here. Okay, so what we're going to do is move forward, down, and then just a little bit around south. We're going to sort of circle this area and see if we can't find the tracks of that leopard. And if we can't, we'll probably head off and see if we can't find where that pride went from yesterday. Genevieve in New York, welcome to the gorgeous African morning that we are experiencing here. You want to know about algae. We don't often get questions about algae, but thank you very much for your question. You want to know, do algae, or is there algae, first of all, in the water, and do any animals derive sort of nutrition from it? The answer is absolutely. There's plenty of algae around. Anywhere where we get water, algae will immediately sort of bloom. And there are lots of insects that feed off the algae and feed off various kinds of zoo and phytoplankton and things like, what else would eat it? I mean, some of our fish species here will feed off algae. We have catfish will eat it if there's enough of it. And a lot of the bird species will probably sample it as part of their diets. So yes, lots of algae, and it definitely provides a food source for a number of animals. Right, on we go. Popped on here a little bit earlier this morning, and he didn't come out here then either. So what I think we'll do is head a little bit further to the east into that rising sun and see if we can't get into one of the drainage lines in the area, because the leopards do tend to like the space afforded by drainage lines. I'm going to check carefully here first. No leopard just yet. Stop here quickly and just listen in the drainage line, in the dip. It's cold. Very cold. You might be able to hear that scuffling in the bushes that so often has tricked me. I thought, well, that sounds like the footfall of a cat. But in actual fact, it turns out to be the footfall of a little covey of francolins. Always nice to see the francolins, though. They're just up ahead here, and they're fossicking around in the undergrowth. Oxford, thank you very much for your question. I'm sure you're enjoying your summer. Well, we suffer through our African winter, which isn't much of a sufferance at all. You want to know how easy is it to tell if it is a male, or the difference between a male and a female leopard call? The answer is I can't tell the difference immediately. It's not, the male is louder. So if you heard one after the other, it would probably be fairly easy. But if you hear them separately, it can be extremely difficult to tell. There are lots of people who will say, oh, there's a male leopard calling. But there's a startling lack of evidence for that, you see, because you're seldom watching the animal when it calls. So I'm always suspicious of people who say, well, they can tell straight away whether it's a male or a female calling. But if you see them, obviously, it's quite easy. And I think if you hear them calling together, which is extremely rare, then it becomes quite more easy. So, yeah, I'm very skeptical about trying to say whether the leopard that I hear calling is a male or a female. Still no tracks. Michael from New Jersey, thank you for your question. A slightly more delicate matter. You'd like to know if I've ever been afraid of a big cat. The answer is absolutely, I've been afraid of a big cat a few times. And interestingly, I mean, when you see a lion on foot for the first time, no matter what the animal does, I mean, most lions will get up and move away, or stand their ground and give you a growl, and if you walk away, they'll leave you. But what happens is, when you see the size of a lion on foot and you realize that you are sort of defenseless, especially if you're not armed. And being armed is a very false sense of security anyway out here. It definitely, it's a very primal feeling that you get from seeing an animal like that on foot. So if you're standing, I mean, I'm not a large man, I'm about 5'8", but if you're standing, if a male lion stands up next to you, I mean, he'll take me, they're almost 5 feet at the, well, not quite, they're about 4.5 feet at the shoulder. So, I mean, they're pretty tall. And they weigh about between 180 and 220 kilograms. So that's a good three times what I weigh. So, I mean, they're an impressive beast to see, combined with their fearsome reputation. And there's something primal in our evolutionary history with them that makes us sort of react to them in a certain way. And it's definitely a feeling of not so much fear the first time, but whoa. But the only time I've been genuinely afraid was when a leopard jumped onto the front of my Land Rover. It was being harassed by some wild dogs at the time, and that's why it was very angry. It leapt on top of the Land Rover. And thankfully, the tracker who I was working with, a wonderful chap called Elvis was sitting at the back, thankfully, because normally he would have been sat on the front. And the leopard leapt onto the tracker seat and mauled it, tore it to pieces, and dug his teeth into it and ripped at it with his claws, and then jumped off the vehicle. And I was genuinely terrified that day that he was going to come over the top and into the car, and that would have been something of a disaster. Have much in the way of tracks. We'll persevere along this road until it crosses the drainage line, and then from there we'll make another plan. Spectacularly beautiful morning. Often if it's completely clear, the sky tends to wash out quite fast and we lose this glorious sort of golden light quite quickly. But today it's just magnificent. On Twitter, thank you for your question. You want to know the roads that we follow. I'm assuming you mean in the reserve. Are they old animal paths, or have they been put here by us and do the animals use them? The answer is a bit of both. It's a good question, Jan. Animals do like to use our roads because they provide less resistance. Same reason that if you had to choose to walk through some wet grass or on a path, you choose the path. So that's one element of it. The other element of it is that some of the roads that we have put through here are tracks that were on old sort of, they're not migration routes, but maybe routes down to a water hole or to a particularly good grazing area, and especially made by hippo, who tend to follow quite similar paths when they come out of the water at night, and also sometimes rhino if they are moving to water. They tend to follow similar paths. So the answer is both. The road placement on a game reserve is an enormously important part of it, because yes, you do want to get to the areas where you think the animals are going to be the most, but you also want to be very sensitive about where you place the roads, and so you don't cause erosion. you ask a fascinating question. Thank you. You want to know, can animals smell our fear? Lisa, I don't believe that fear smells like much. But what I will tell you is that animals, they communicate in a very different way from us most of the time. They don't, our vocal communication is so much of who we are that we've lost a lot of the other stuff. A lot of the ability to interpret smells and sights, these smells and body language and that sort of thing, and even something like almost like an energy, an emotional state that we do definitely portray. And so I think, I'm just going to turn the vehicle around here. We're heading slightly in the wrong direction now. So Lisa, I think an animal will pick up quite strongly on our body language and on our, hold on a second. On our body language, I think they pick up on our energy as well. So it's the same as when you walk into a room and you feel, you meet someone for the first time, you get a good feeling from them or you get a bad feeling, or you'll attach a value to whatever that feeling is. And I think animals get the same thing. So they can tell if we're afraid, definitely. I mean, we know they can. You know they can with a dog. And a wild animal is even more in tune than a dog is. Now, your question probably is the first part of a question that asks, will an animal then attack if you feel fear? And the answer is not by default, no. Very few animals will attack unless they feel cornered or threatened. But I don't think fear necessarily has a distinct smell. I wouldn't bet my money on it though. Me few coins, I wouldn't bet on that. David in Michigan, welcome to this magnificent African dawn. You want to know, how safe is a tracker basically on the front of the vehicle, and what sort of guidelines or safety procedures are there in place? Have I ever heard of a tracker being taken out? The answer is I've never heard of a tracker being taken out by an animal. Where I used to work, what we used to do was if we had in a predator sighting, we'd put the tracker back inside the car. But often that was more for the sake of the predator than it was for the tracker, because predators tend to feel threatened, and then they possibly might become dangerous by that sort of very obvious human form sitting on the front of the vehicle. That said, there are lots of reserves where that doesn't happen and there's never been an issue. I think there is the odd, I think I've heard of one incident of a tracker being knocked off a tracker seat by an elephant, but not killed. So it's, as long as you sort of stay part of the vehicle, it tends to be a fairly safe thing to do. Buffalo activity in the night. There doesn't seem to be much leopard activity this morning. Right, we have a great question from Jane in Iowa. Just let me check for some tracks here, Jane, and then I'm going to stop and answer your question because it's an important one. It's very important, in fact. All right, let me just find you a spot where Phil can take a picture of the magnificent sun. There we go. No, not quite. Too many bushes in the way. A bit further. Really is just a very magnificent morning, despite the seeming lack of any kind of mammal life. Right, I'm going to stop here. Phil, if you can just get us a shot there of the sun. Jane in Iowa, you wanted to know, you talking about habituation of cats especially, and the issues associated with that American tourist, I think she was, who was killed in the Lion Park last week. Now, this incident has created untold hassles for game reserves like the one I'm sitting on here. So the first thing to say, Jane, is that that place where the incident took place, tragic as it was, it's a lion park. It's not a game reserve by any stretch of the imagination. Those animals are fed by human beings. A lot of them were raised by human beings. A lot of them have had so they've all had contact with human beings that has resulted in them losing their natural fear of human beings, especially with regard to being fed by human beings. Now, that is very distinct and very different from a game reserve like we're in now, where animals are habituated to vehicles. So they are habituated to the vehicles, they are not afraid of the vehicles, but they do not associate the vehicles with food or anything else like that. So often what happens is, if we go walking in this area, we are certainly able to do that safely, because the animals that we see have a natural fear of us, and they don't associate, and they maintain that fear of us, which is ancient, and they don't associate us with any kind of with food or with physical contact, which they've had in those sort of zoo environments, which is where that incident took place. So if new lions come into this area, what they do is they will normally run away from us, especially if they see you on foot. Their initial reaction is one of complete fear. It's not one of, let me jump on there and see what that tastes like. The reason that happened in the Lion Park, and this is very crucial for people to understand, is that it's not a natural environment at all. It's a contrived has negative connotation. I mean, there may be some valuable work that they're doing there. I don't know exactly, but all of those animals have had physical contact with human beings, and they've been fed by people, and so they don't have a natural fear of us. It's completely different from a wild system like this. Okay, Jane, I hope that answers your question. It's a very important one, and anything that's unclear about my answer, I'm more than happy to explain to you, because the last thing in the world we want, I mean, our tourism and ecotourism in this area is the biggest job creator, one of the biggest job creators we have in South Africa. And if incidents like that were to impact negatively on the job creation and the conservation value that tourism has, it will be extremely sad. So I'm more than happy to talk about it, and more than happy to answer any questions about it. I have never heard of an incident in an area like this, in a natural game reserve, where that has happened, where an animal has has taken somebody. Yes, there have been incidents in game reserves, but that's almost always with animals either at night, where people are being silly and they're walking around without torches or without security guards, where they've been expressly told not to, and where animals have been handled by human beings, and so they don't have that natural fear of us. There's a leopard on the road. Right there, fool. Isn't that wonderful? He's been sitting there listening to me waffle on, thinking, what is this guy talking about? Isn't that wonderful? We're just going to let him get used to us for a few minutes, or just a minute, and then I'm going to sneak slowly forward and get a better view. I don't know who he is. I'm sure some of you leopard experts there will be able to tell me. When we get a bit closer, you might even be able to tell me now. He looks pretty relaxed. What a wonderful stroke of luck that is. Right, I'm just going to sneak forward. I'm, from this distance, going to guess that that's a young male. But let's go and have a quick look. Well, in fact, let's have a long look. Lovely animal, this. Isn't he beautiful? So what I don't want to do is drive straight at him if I can avoid it, because the Land Rover's got these two big headlights at the front of it that make it look like eyes. And we just want him to be very relaxed around us. Just turn off here. Definitely listening to us. This does look like a young male to me. And if any of you have got any idea, I'd love to know who you think he is. No, this isn't a young male. This is quite an aged male. He's got 5 spots on the one side, and he's got a damaged right eye. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this could be Tingana. Is that correct? Sorry, I meant Mvula. I believe that he has a damaged eye. Yeah, he looks like one. He's not a very large male leopard, this, but he's rather magnificent, isn't he? Yeah, you can see by his tattered ears that he's not a youngster anymore. But that eye, I haven't seen it before, but I have heard it described as being extremely badly damaged, and it looks to me like it's healing quite nicely. Astonishing power that animals have to heal out here. So he's got 4 spot patterns on his right. Oh, look at him. Yeah. So I've just had a little update there that says 3.5 weeks ago that eye was badly bloodshot and damaged. That was just before I got here. And you can see how incredibly it's healed. And especially an animal like this, a leopard has to be, their ability to heal has to be exceptional, because if they get injured at all, remember they live completely on their own. And so there's no one to help them eat or look after their territories. So they must be able to heal exceptionally well. Now that eye looks to me, when he squints over to the right-hand side, so our left, then you can see a bit of blood, but otherwise it looks pretty much healed. It's still a bit milky, but clearing nicely. So I like to use the spot patterns when I identify leopards. And he's got 4 on the right-hand side, so our left-hand side as you're looking at him. If you look at the spots, for those of you who have just joined us or who are new to leopard identification, the most reliable way of doing it, if you know them well, then it's pretty easy. But if you just want to quickly look, there you get a very nice view. Phil, can you zoom in on is that as far in as we can get? Okay, so just above his whiskers there is a unique spot pattern of 4 spots. 3 very faint, at least 1 very faint in the front, and then 3 behind that. Yeah, you can see now when he looks to the side that his eye doesn't look great. So we've got some information coming in. Thank you to all of you who have managed to identify him as Mvula. He's got a 4-3 spot pattern. I'm looking at that eye again. Ellen in Georgia, I think it is. You let me know that it wasn't the actual eye, but the inside of the lid. Now, George Ann. I'm not sure that that's necessarily true. If I look at him now, there's definitely an injury on the inside lid, but his eye doesn't come around back into place in the socket like it should. I wonder if he's still got sight in that eye. Ooh, that doesn't look so good now. It always amazes me how incredibly much the people who watch this show know about the leopards. It's fantastic to have the repository of knowledge like that. Kirsty, you're looking at him thinking looks like he's got quite a full belly. I would agree. Difficult to say with him lying down like this, but I would agree that from what I can see now, it looks to me like his belly is full. So he may well have had himself a bit of a snack last night. Remember, those of you who've just maybe perhaps tuned in or come to us for the first time, please send us your questions and comments to #SafariLive or questions@WildEarthTV. They can be about this magnificent cat, or they can be about anything at all that you want to ask about. Well, within reason. I'm not great on nuclear physics. And welcome to anybody who's new to us. We love to have you on board. Ooh, shh. Was that not spectacular? Now he'll listen to see if there's a response. I believe he and Tingana have been having a bit of a territorial standoff of late. So he'll listen to see if there's a response. sound travels a huge distance. Wasn't that special? Yeah, he's got a pretty full belly there, Kirsty. I've so often heard that. I think I've seen it maybe once or twice before. Teresa, Sharon, Purple Rain, and Tula. Purple Rain, I doubt that's the birth name you got. It's a pretty good Twitter handle, though. You've been in discussion. First of all, Teresa, you said that he's identifiable by the M on between his eyes. There are quite a few male leopards that have that. He's going to call again. Oh, that's just the best sound. So, Teresa, that M is not unusual on the front of a leopard. Yeah, it's a nice confirming sort of marking on a leopard like this. But the most obvious or the best way to look at them is that spot pattern. But I mean, you know this animal on sight. Those of you who've seen him a few times, you know him on sight. Then, Tula and Purple Rain, you were discussing whether you thought that the eye has any sight in it left. My guess is going to be that it's probably severely compromised, and it would be fascinating to know from a vet. But it's difficult to say from this, from sitting here and from my lack of medical experience whether he'd be able to see out of it or not. I'm not sure, but judging by the size of his belly, it would say to me that he's probably hunting okay. And they can do that with one eye. There's no reason they shouldn't. Well, there he goes. Yeah, he's marking his territories in the middle of some form of territorial dispute. Can anyone tell me how he lost? Watch him spray now. He's going to spray that bush, rub his scent onto it, and now spray his scent. There we go. Anyone tell me how the injury happened? Was it with a fight with another male? I'm smelling there. Isn't that wonderful? So they'll spray there. Very important. Penny Pine, you want to know, will his saliva play a role? I'm just going to try and get around here. We can't go through there. Any role in healing his eye? It might. I mean, certainly they lick wounds, and he could lick his paws and touch his eye with it. So there may be some form of certainly cleansing from that. But in terms of its antibiotic effect, I'm not really sure. I think the issue with his eye there, I can see him, thanks. So the issue with his eye is going to be that it's structural damage more than it's infection. It's just there in front of us, around this next little bend. Southern California, thank you for your information on this, on Mvula's father, whose name apparently was Tumbela. Now, the word Tumbela means to hide, which is a lovely name for a leopard. And apparently he was also blind in his right eye. So, and lived to a very ripe old age. Apparently this leopard is 10. They love using those bushes that he's marking now. It's called a guarri bush, and none of the animals like to graze them. So he'll mark that. Apparently nobody is entirely sure how he hurt himself or what hurt him. So thank you for your answers. Purple Rain, you say there's been quite a lot of speculation. Thank you for that. If I might add my speculative guess to this, I would say male lions like this are normally only harmed by other male lions, at least male leopards, or sometimes by lionesses. They sometimes get caught in fights with lionesses, which is very stupid of them because they're much smaller than a lioness. Oh, that's a great shot. But I would say, given that what we've seen of his sort of territorial dispute with Tingana over the last few weeks, it wouldn't surprise me if that's what happened to his eye. If Tingana's powerful. He's been in this drainage line, and we do sometimes lose signal here. I'm sorry about that. We'll have a word with Eugene, possibly withhold his breakfast because of it. But we're back now. And this is just really special. To follow a male leopard like this, for me, is an incredible experience. And he's marking his territory very fastidiously. I'm just going to try and get that smell of popcorn that they say comes from a leopard marking. It smells like pee to me. He's heading along this road slowly, marking his territory. We are going to probably descend again, so if you lose us, I apologize in advance. He's just looking. He may have heard something down there in the drainage line that takes his fancy. I think he has eaten fairly recently. Now look how he's stuck his tail up there. Phil, can we get in close on his tail there, please? On his tail. Can you see the white little pom-pom on the end of his tail there? It's fascinating to me. What they do is when they hear birds starting to alarm call, they often flick that tail up and the birds sort of calm down. It's amazing. It's like he's saying to them, guys, I'm not after you. Don't give away my presence. So he's seen something, I would guess, that makes him not want to be alarmed at. It's the best thing in the world when you come around a corner and find a spotted cat like that just walking up the road. He seems to be going up out of the drainage line, which is excellent. Diane, on Twitter, you have a geographical question, which given my newness to this reserve, I'm not going to answer with particular accuracy. We are in the, you want to know where on the reserve we are? Oh, look at that. So he leaves the scent of his whole body in there. That's just wonderful. We are in and around the Mvula drainage line, the southern end thereof. So that's why you keep losing our signal every so often. I just need to give an update to the game drive, so please excuse me 1 second. Good morning, Ephraim. We've got a male leopard here. If I'm not mistaken, we're on that 2-track that goes parallel with the Mvula, probably Nyala Road south. So he marks the same bushes every time, just about. Always a quarry bush. Hello, Carol. Nice question there. How long does a leopard live? Well, a leopard in captivity will potentially live up to 20 years because life is just much easier if you're being fed every day. But in the wild like this, seldom beyond 15. 15 would be pretty old. He's 10, apparently. He looks older than that to me, but that's because of the stresses and strains of living in the wild. And he's not a very big male, this one. So he's done really well to get where he has and dominate like he has. He's just smelling quickly. He's picked something up in the air, and he's listening. He's totally silent as he moves. Debbie on Twitter, thank you for your question. You wanted to know how old he will be when he loses. Debbie, the answer is when he dies, basically. His older and weaker, and if he does get thrown out of it by a younger male, he won't last long. So the answer is 14 or 15 years is normally when he'd lose his territory. He's seen something up ahead. I can't see what it is. And he heard a Franklin to the right. That's why he looked there. Isn't that wonderful how silent he is? There's some squirrels that have seen him, and they're alarm calling. That's what you can hear off to the right-hand side. That's not a particularly attractive trait of the leopard, or any animal, I suppose, but must be done. Privilege. Eugene this morning.
Hello everyone. Being out in the bush and being out there live has its technical challenges. We're experiencing some of that.
Welcome back everybody. I'm so sorry about those technical issues we're having. It is because, as somebody once said to me, figuring this stuff out is like figuring out the dark arts. But basically, we've been in a very low-lying area, a lot of cloud cover today, so probably a slight change in pressure, which does make the signal difficulties quite bad. So sorry about that, but we're still with Mvula, and it's a wonderful privilege just to be spending the morning with him. He's now having a... He's eating buffalo dung. That's fascinating. I've never seen this before. He's clearing off the crusty top and actually going for the the wet stuff underneath. Oh, I hope none of you have eaten relatively recently. Now, I can only imagine that he's doing that for the sort of leftover nutrients, or perhaps even the bacteria that are in dung like that. Isn't that fascinating? Mvula Road North. Male leopard, Mvula Road North. Yes, affirmative. Sorry, just excuse me 1 second while I talk on the radio. Guys, this is Mvula. I've got a bit disorientated on the road, but I'm pretty sure we're on the road. The animal is very relaxed. So we're just going to, I think, unless anybody in the Twitterverse wishes to see something else, and I'd have to say you'd need to have your head read, perhaps. We're going to carry on following him because he's just... Did you see that? Did you see how when that bird started alarm calling, his tail flicked straight up? And there he's holding it. While the testicular shouts at him, he's holding the tail up. You can hear the testicular going. Psh, 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 psh. Oh, it's so nice when that happens. And now as the bird stops calling, he gets a bit further away. So he drops his tail down. Isn't that wonderful? I like to look at the road while we're doing this, because you can see exactly what a fresh leopard track looks like on this sort of substrate. And the answer is it's pretty unobvious. Not easy to see. Jen and Kay, you ask an interesting question. Is he scent marking for the benefit of other leopards, or is he also doing it for other predators such as lions? Jen and Kay, a leopard like this will do everything in his power to avoid attracting the attentions of any other predator, especially lions. So it's definitely not for lions. Would lions smell it? Without question. But it's not for them that he's doing it. It's purely for the benefit of other male leopards, especially probably Tingana. Spotted something there. You want to know, do leopards mark only the perimeter of their territories or also the middle? They will mark much more on the perimeter than they will in the middle, but they will mark the odd bush in the middle as well. far more on the perimeter. Now he's gone to ground. He's having a snooze. I'm going to get in there and see if we can't get a little bit closer. I need to try and figure out exactly where I am so I can help the other rangers in. See him there, Phil? Claire in New York, you ask a fascinating question. You want to know about colouring in leopards, and do they have... Sorry, Claire, I'm going to answer your question now. I've just got to guide somebody else in here. We need to help the other rangers. Quite far, I think. Just keep coming. I have got your audio. Okay, Claire, in New York. Sorry, I'm talking into the radio. I don't think Ephraim needs to know about Claire in New York. Claire, the colour on leopards is very much just based on genetics, like blonde hair or dark hair. It's not the light playing tricks with you. You absolutely are seeing different colours. Some are more gold, some are whiter. And I'm just going to move forward so that these guys can get a better view. This is Nyala Road, is it?
Yeah, the Nyala North, because Bubblegum Jam is right here. Thanks very much. Thanks for Inga and for glass. Which glove?
Brent's glove, yes. Ephraim has picked up Brent's glove. That means we're going to have 2 gloves tomorrow, which is excellent news indeed.
This one is Mvula. The biggest boy.
You can hear the cameras snapping viciously behind me from the other guests. So just back to the colour, I have, in my experience, certainly it seems to be very much passed on from the mothers. And the leopards that I have known, there was one very famous leopard in the Sabi Sands called the 3-4 female, made very famous by John Varty and his films. And the 3-4 female was very pale, but like Karula, I think, pretty pale, pretty white. And then just around the corner, there was a female called the Vomba female, and the Vomba female was like molten gold. She was the most magnificent colour. And he's just cleaning himself like any house cat would.
that make you start again. Ah.
Wesley, you ask you've got a fascinating question here. You asked us why do leopards ever interact with things like rhino or buffalo? Basically, you're asking, do they stalk animals that are possibly too big for them to kill? The answer is yes, especially young males. They're the ones that tend to play and push the boundaries, just like human beings. And so I have seen two young males, two brothers, sort of aged 18 months, stalking a rhino. The rhino took absolutely no notice of them. I think he noticed them, but didn't kind of pay them any attention at all. And that was hilarious to see. So they will stalk the giraffe and all sorts of things that they probably won't kill. There are records of male leopards killing giraffe, but I think those are extremely rare. And just to keep you updated, especially for our newer viewers, we don't show rhino. We do see them every so often, but we tend not to show them. We don't like to make their presence known because of the issues around poaching that we have. And so we avoid showing them. We don't see many of them here, but there are some around every so often.
Yeah, I don't know if you're getting it. Yeah, I think maybe it's like 5. They say the eyes are good.
Gilly from Wisconsin, you'd like to tell me that he has a 2-lane landing strip down his back, which is a good identifier, whereas his son, Djuma, has got a 4-lane landing strip. I can sort of see what you mean, actually. I've never looked at that before. Thank you, Gilly. That is, I can see what you mean by a 2-lane landing strip. Just where Phil is focusing now, just above the tail, you can actually see quite a nice little 2-lane landing strip there. So that's quite a nice one. Brenda from Pennsylvania, you ask about wind direction and leopards. It's a good question, and one that comes up quite often for very good reason. You wanted to know, were we downwind of him while we were walking? We were in fact upwind, so he was walking with the wind, whereas he was walking largely in a northerly direction, and most of the weather on a day like this is a gentle breeze from the southeast. So when he's marking territory, he can't really afford to worry too much about the wind, otherwise he'd be walking north for the rest of his days and end up somewhere in Egypt by the time he finished his life. So they will probably pay attention to the wind when they are hunting, but when he's marking territory, I don't think they pay much attention to it. And in fact, I've yet to see an animal obviously walk around the wind to avoid sort of trying to give away their presence. I suspect they probably do, but not as much as we think. That babbler you can hear has now just spotted him, getting a bit upset. And as the babbler started calling, so that little tail has started to flick up and down. You ask a good question. It's a valid one. And it is one that we have to be constantly cognizant of all the time. You want to know that does the vehicle noise not compromise his hearing while we're driving along behind him? The answer is definitely. There's no question that compromises his hearing, but we do it in the most sensitive manner that we can. So you'll notice how often, as soon as I stop the vehicle, I turn it off. So I don't let the engine run while we stopped. I tried to speak more quietly around him, and also the thing is that we couldn't follow them without the vehicle. Ideally, you want an electric vehicle, and we've used some out here, but because we're in the bush, the only electric vehicles I've ever used tend to break down quite quickly out here. In fact, one of them burst into flames, which isn't ideal when you're on game drive. And so that going forward, when the electric vehicles become easier to maintain, especially out here, that's what we'll use. But for now, this little petrol engine that we've got in this car is the quietest that we can get. And so that's what we use. But Carla, yes, we need to be very cognizant, especially if they're hunting, of the noise that we do make. Also, the smell from a vehicle like this is, enormous. So the bush around this leopard will smell completely different because of the petrol fumes and the oil and everything else that comes off the car. So some excellent questions around his calling earlier. Some of you wanted to know, is that what we refer to as leopard sawing? Yes, absolutely it is. That's precisely what the sawing is. And then Genevieve in New York, you want to know, could I actually feel the vibrations? Not from the distance that I was, but the only other cat out here that has a similar vocal setup, which is a lion, if you get close enough to them, you can definitely feel it in the middle of your chest. And close enough to that animal while he's calling, especially if he's in a drainage line where it starts to echo, you definitely do feel it. You feel it kind of in the middle of your chest. You feel your ribs rattling around. It is an awesome sound. He spotted something.